You mess with the bull.
You mess with the bull.
You get the horns.
You get the horns.
The Roy Green Show on the Chorus Radio Network.
A 42-year-old Danish man who burned a Quran and posted a video of it on Facebook has been charged with blasphemy in Denmark. The New York Times writes, the decision stunned many Danes. No one has been convicted of blasphemy in Denmark since 1946. It was a Danish newspaper which enraged Muslims globally in 2005 by publishing 12 cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. Riots followed, but Danish prosecutors refused to charge the newspaper's editors with blasphemy at the time. The regional prosecutor who's charging the 42-year-old man, said in a statement, and this is from the New York Times, it is the prosecution's view that circumstances involving the burning of holy books, such as the Bible and the Quran, can in certain cases be a violation of the blasphemy clause, which covers public scorn or mockery of religion. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is the founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. His book is The Battle for the Soul I'm sorry, Zuhdi, I've said it so many times I can't remember the name of the book.
Oh, A Battle for the Soul of Islam.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and former lieutenant commander in the United States Navy and former president of the Arizona Medical Association. So since 1946, there's been no conviction on blasphemy charge in Denmark, and in 2005, the Danes did not prosecute the editors of the newspaper that published the 12 cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. What do you make of this story?
Well, listen, first it's important to preface the fact that if we look at what happened to the Jewish community and the genocide of the Holocaust, it started with the burning of their holy scriptures. So we have to be careful what this means. Now, as abhorrent as that is, I just can't believe this law is coming out of Denmark. I mean, it sounds like something out of Saudi Arabia or Iran. Our Muslim Reform Movement has a mantra that's at the top of our work. It says, ideas don't have rights, human beings do. And the reason these theocracies across the planet put people in prison for criticizing the president and say that's equivalent to criticizing Islam is that they hold ideas with the same rights as human beings, and there's a slippery slope there. So as abhorrent as it is to burn scripture and the symbolism that brings to the religious freedom, obstacles that poses, I just can't believe a modernized, civilized Western democracy is trying to convict someone for an act that is simply against not an individual that has rights, but against a piece of paper that doesn't have rights.
What I found interesting as well, I was looking through this story, there's quite a few stories on it, but the one that I printed was from the New York Times. I don't usually print stories from the Times, but it's as though this guy, this individual in Denmark, has been shunned by his own community because there have only been 415 cases where what he published on Facebook, and that included the visuals of the burning of the Quran, only 415 times as it had been passed along. So that's for some people that's a big number. That to me says though that the majority of people are just shaking their heads and turning their backs on him.
And Roy, the importance of this story. Let me give you an example. In Jordan, there was a free-thinking Muslim who wrote a cartoon about the Quran and said that basically ISIS was reading from the Quran. Well, the courts in Jordan put him in prison for blasphemy because he connected the Quran to ISIS, and they thought they were doing good. And 2 weeks later, he let him out. The judge let him out because the king intervened. Bottom line is that they had the blasphemy laws on the books. When he was let out, he was by a vigilante assassinated. This was 2 months ago, assassinated. So what happens is the blasphemy laws and carrying the imprimatur of the government then basically gives impunity to vigilantes to do acts of terror against these individuals. So you raise a very good point, which is people ignore these things if you ignore it. Hardly anyone pays attention to this kind of thing. But it becomes the test of free speech when the government starts to act on behalf of radicals, and it's absurd.
And as I read the story and listened more to accounts of it, and I talked to a couple of friends of mine about it, the question that came up was, what will other governments do now? Now that the Danish government and the Danes have forever held such freedom of speech in such fundamental high regard, if the Danes do this, what happens with other governments, not only in Western Europe, but elsewhere?
It's been happening. How many books we can list of publishers, known large publishers in the West that were getting ready to print and then got threats and decided not to print it. The term Islamophobia now has become equivalent to bigotry against Muslims, and yet I won't use the term because Islam doesn't have rights. Muslims have rights, and other human beings obviously have rights. But they invoke the term Islamophobia because they want, it's interesting. Jews talk about anti-Semitism. They rarely talk about Judeophobia because modernized faith communities realize that it's the individuals that can be targets of bigotries and not the ideas that need to be protected, to be criticized, because that's the only way we can do our reform in our Muslim reform movement, is to begin to push back against the established ideas of what is and what is not Islam.
Zuhdi, everybody gets hurt if the fundamentals of freedom of expression are compromised, and governments become increasingly engaged. Everyone will suffer. Thank you so much for the time. Sorry, I pulled a blank on the title of the book. I've said it 1,000 times. Battle for the Soul of Islam.
Anytime.
All the best,
Thanks,
Zuhdi.
Roy.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, and founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. We're back in a minute.